Good afternoon and welcome back to Tame Bay Live. Delighted to be joined by Andrew Norman from ShipStation today. But before I introduce him properly, if you have any questions during this session or any session, just beneath the screen where you're watching this presentation, you'll see a little checkbox where you can actually click to submit a question. That'll come straight through to Andrew and myself. We're going to save questions till the end of the presentation, but we'll get through as many of them as we can. And also, if you'd like to find out more about ShipStation, then after the presentation, visit their booth on the Tame Bay Live platform to find out more and make contact. But who are ShipStation? Well, ShipStation are actually part of a much larger organisation. So maybe, Andrew, I should let you tell us a little bit about yourself and about ShipStation. I know you've been in the industry for years. You're an old Tame Bay friend. So welcome back. But for those that haven't met you before, who are you? And tell us about the ShipStation family.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's nice to be back. Hi, everybody. Thanks for making time this afternoon. My name's Andrew Norman. I am responsible for ShipStation in Europe and Asia. I was going to talk for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes maximum, just to give you our observations. I'll jump into ShipStation in a second. Chris, I think what we want to do today was just tell you a little bit about us. It's not too heavy a vendor presentation. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about ShipStation all the way through. We're going to give you our observations of 2021. Then our observations or trends, I guess what we expect to see in 2022, which I think, Chris, would be good for you and I to jump into some of that in a sort of Q&A and try and explore that with the audience in more detail. And then, our view on how we help you solve the challenges and scale and grow out your business. So as I say, about 15 minutes of the presentation, and we'll try and keep this as interactive and jump into some questions from everybody. So thanks for the segue, Chris. So I work for a company called ShipStation. As you can see here, we're a multi-channel, multi-carrier order and delivery management platform. And our mission is really to streamline and automate all of your core business process to really give you the brain space and the capacity to think about growing your business. We don't specifically grow your business per se. We help you scale your business to give you the mental capacity and the brain space to think about how you grow your business. So we are part of a wider family called Octane. For those of you who've been in the industry a while, we were, I guess, previously known as Stamps.com, publicly traded, based in California. So we're now about 2,000 people, originally US-based. You can see the numbers at the bottom. We're global. Anything related to e-commerce order fulfillment, one of our companies can potentially help you do that. So some of these brands you won't know, they don't mean much to you, and some of them are very North American focused. But the brands, Chris, you'll recognize some of these are brands that are probably closer to some of the UK and European audience. ShipStation, we've been in the market about 2-3 years in the UK and Europe. Metapack, obviously, some of you may know, there's a fantastic conference called the Delivery Conference, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. So, there's some great data and some great expertise for some of you to tap into. And then Packlink, those of you that are selling on Etsy or eBay will probably be more familiar with Packlink, which is eBay shipping, and some of Etsy shipping is powered by Packlink. So what does this all mean? Our mission is really, whether you're a consumer, C2C or B2C or large enterprise, anything that relates to e-commerce order fulfillment is potentially an area that we can help. And we're investing very heavily in Europe, and we're excited about how we can potentially help merchants over the next period of our journey. So just want to jump into peak. As I say, this is just observations. Just want to give a shout out to our friends at IMRG. Obviously, Chris, you and I know that team there. They have some fantastic data and some perspectives. So some of the data is from IMRG. As I say, there's some fantastic data you can get from Metapack too. I think they've got the delivery conferences in a couple of weeks, and there's some fantastic reports which will give you, again, some additional learnings from 2021 peak and some perspective on 2022, excuse me. So I'm going to try and avoid this being too cliched, but obviously every year is a bit of a crazy year at the moment, but 2021 was no exception. We're obviously in the e-commerce space, but our sort of personal life and professional life intertwines at the moment, as I'm sure I'm sure you'd agree. So, 2021, we saw some varying restrictions across the UK, between England, between Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, which obviously impacts us with our sort of e-commerce hats on, and how consumers, are consumers in the middle of a lockdown? How does that impact their purchasing and buying behavior? We had some very acute supply challenges. Don't need to tell some of you in the audience, you're probably living through that. And some real pressure on household income, right? Which is from the soaring inflation, that all of these things kind of combine perfectly into some crazy things that happen, some real winners and maybe some real kind of challenges along the way. So I'm going to come on to this in the following slides. Sales are really strong, but you'll see in the next few slides, performance fell year on year overall. There's some evidence, or we feel that there's some evidence that Black Friday is maybe losing some of its pull. Obviously Black Friday, Cyber Monday is still a very, very big event in the US and in the UK, but it looks to have become a little bit diluted, as you'll see in the following slides. There was a lot of more sustained growth prior to Black Friday and some discounting earlier in the peak. And it's interesting, we're very focused on it in the UK, but when you zoom out into other countries, Black Friday isn't yet a thing. It may well become a thing, but it's not as much of a thing. So for those of you that are selling in other countries, you may have experienced something similar, where Black Friday is a very UK thing right now. So sales performance grew steadily during peak, but I think overall we feel we may have seen a return to more typical buying behavior. And obviously, Chris, you and I can jump into that and get some feelings from the audience. So on this slide, you can see from numbers that sales were really strong in the 3 weeks prior to Black Friday. Numbers were a little bit softer, sort of year on year in that immediate week. If you see the trends, hopefully you can see that clearly. The distinction between that, 2021 is the blue line. You can compare that over 2020. So you'll see the 3 weeks prior to that, 2021 was stronger than previous years. And in some of the days in that immediate week, this actually terminates at Black Friday, or stops at Black Friday, not Cyber Monday. But I think the trend holds through from memory, from the slides, so from the data, excuse me. So really interesting run up to peak, a lot of discounting. I think a lot of supply nervousness. There was a lot of chatter about retailers, and merchants being short of supply. So that might have also contributed to why people were buying earlier, as well as discounting. Pretty heavy text on the top. I apologize for that, but this is showing year on year 2021 versus 2020. You can see from the spend, from the copy and the text on the top, spend and conversion rates remained very steady, very strong. Online traffic did dip a little bit. We think that might be related to the kind of some of the things I mentioned about supply, and also reopening a physical store. So a kind of interest in, year on year slightly down, and there's definitely some variance between offline and online, or even, the omni-channel retailers that provide both brick and mortar and online too. So what does that all mean, and what are our observations? So we feel, again, this varies very much from country to country, and probably in some ways category to category, but it feels like some of the hype around Black Friday's cooling, that could have just been specific to 2021, and we may see something very, very different this year, but certainly the data last year suggests that as the case. Clothing did really, really well this year. It was interesting. Again, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this, Chris. There wasn't a PlayStation or an Xbox or an iPhone launch, right? So tech seemed a little bit softer from the data that we've seen. Clothing did really well. There's a lot of stuff in the press, about clothing seems to be the go-to present for a lot of people over Christmas. So certain categories obviously did well. Some categories may have been a little bit softer from the data. Definitely return to some things in store, as you'd imagine. Some maybe higher risk purchases or bigger purchase. Home and garden, I guess, is the obvious one that kind of springs to mind. And we saw some very real supply chain pressure. Again, for those of you in the audience, I probably don't need to tell you that. I'm sure you were finding it challenging to source products and have predictable delivery times for the merchant. For the supply and product that you were trying to source. So, what do we see for 2022? Some of these aren't new. I think many of these things aren't new, but there's definitely some evidence that some of these things may start to mature. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just some of the things that, you know, we've been reading and feedback we get from our merchants. So sustainability, you know, there's so many levels to this, right? There's obviously sustainability around the actual product and the merchandise in the first place, but we're closer to this, we're closer to the fulfillment side. And order fulfillment. And so we are definitely seeing a lot more demand or interest and requirements from our merchants around sustainability and, you know, consolidating deliveries. And, you know, you've seen some of the stuff with Amazon now in your Prime option. There's the, you know, the sort of green option where you can consolidate a bunch of consolidate orders into one delivery on one day rather than having, you know, 5 different deliveries in one day. So that's definitely one thing that we would expect. I think in our world, we're trying to really help retailers find the sort of fastest, safest, cheapest, and also greenest options of how they fulfill orders. And you know, some of that might be by moving inventory closer to your consumers, because obviously a lot of it is shipped around the planet, and sometimes it might make sense to have inventory closer to where your consumers are. There's a number of different layers around that. Next thing is around omni-channel, and that's a kind of very overused phrase or word in our industry, as many of you know. But you know, there's still quite some sort of separation between online and offline. You know, the sort of pick up in store, return in store. You know, we definitely expect to see a lot more maturity. It feels like people have definitely gravitated towards, you know, buying locally. You know, we've seen a lot of interest in lockers, you know, within Post and Amazon and other partners. So that kind of, you know, buy and how, when, where you, and again, deliver, I guess, which is closer to our world, however and whenever you want to, you know, take advantage. That's definitely something we expect to see more maturation of. Augmented reality, seems like it's been pretty well adopted in certain of the, you know, the big fashion houses, but I was just reading some of the IKEA technology that they've deployed, you know, to build a lot more sort of virtual visualization of, you know, home and garden, other categories. So again, as we've been locked down, I think it feels like that's sort of driven the maturity and the adoption of that technology for other categories outside of fashion. Personalization isn't new for many of you that are, you know, experienced in this market. I guess there's a distinction between personalization, but really then using the data. You know, there's so many companies now that have fantastic data and are really able to have much more beyond just personalization, have a real handle on, you know, how you as a consumer wish to buy and what that experience should look like. So I think as the technology improves, we would expect to see more data-driven experience. Returns, interesting. Again, I'll be interested to get your perspective on this, Chris. You know, returns have sort of been there. You know, there's been a kind of a battleground, I guess, around, you know, returns. How much does returns impact conversion? We know it does, and we know that that's a reason why people, you know, may or may not buy from you again. Again, returns we feel is kind of one of those areas that economically is quite challenging, especially for certain categories. But we feel that sort of free returns is now starting to become the benchmark, not only clearly about across fashion, which has been pretty well adopted, but even in other categories. So that's another area that we would expect to see. Now, the last one is inventory. This will probably bring a smile to our face for those of us that have been working across multiple channels. But, you know, I don't know about you, it's been, again, very, very challenging in peak 2021, trying to buy products. You know, you buy something that you think is actually in stock, and then lo and behold, of course, when you go to complete the order, you know, it's out of stock. It still surprises me how many platforms or retailers, you know, are still challenged by the inventory and stock control. So I think having that immediacy and that transparency all the way across the supply chain of where inventory is for you as a consumer would be a great thing. So thanks for the segue to Ben and Chris. How can we help? If I just sort of explain what we do a little bit more detail. So our world is kind of all about selling in multiple channels in multiple countries. So we try and help and promote our brands, manufacturers, retailers to sell in as many relevant channels as they can across as many countries or markets as they can do. So we help bring that inventory, we help bring those orders in from a number of different places, whether they're marketplaces or classic e-commerce platforms. I left the Magento symbol rather than the Adobe symbol. Some of you may have noticed that, just sort of a bit of nostalgia there. Social commerce, we power our company, we power Facebook Marketplace. So we're definitely starting to see more and more people using social as a mainstream platform, and then obviously ERP for those of you that run something like Brightpearl or NetSuite or SAP B1 or whatever, we can bring all those orders in. And then our world now is really trying to help people really orchestrate those orders, right? So I guess historically it would have been maybe just fulfilling yourself or ourselves, from the warehouse, but we're kind of much more about trying to help people orchestrate orders, whether that's shipped from store. We saw a huge amount of demand for our technology to help people ship from store. All you need is a printer and an internet connection, and you can use your store as a warehouse, right? So our objective is to help people orchestrate those orders, whether that's into their own warehouse or warehouses in different countries, whether that's to connect those orders into drop shippers, or whether that's to open up your stores as a fulfillment network. So I guess think of us as a way of orchestrating orders to lots of different fulfillment options. Obviously, part of that is by linking into different carriers, and sometimes for more emerging companies, we have discounted rates that people can use from us. Or if you have your own rates, then you can bring those too. So you can have a split model where you are drop shipping, you are fulfilling yourself from different warehouses, and you can also fulfill from store if you choose to do that. So I guess our perspective, we want to help people reach more customers. We know the challenges when people sell in more channels in more countries, it brings huge complexity and huge challenges, and sometimes it can hold the business back. So our mission is to help you, reach more customers and remove some of that friction and complexity. We obviously have been doing this for a while, so we don't have all the answers, but we definitely are very focused and specialize in our area in terms of e-commerce order fulfillment. So we definitely are very hands-on with our merchants. We do run ShipStation University. We have we invest very, very heavily in support to try and help our merchants, optimize their business process. We're not trying to just, introduce technology. We're trying to help people structure their business in the right way too. Delivery, I guess we feel that delivery maybe may not be a differentiator per se, but we definitely think that delivery should be a point of difference. We feel as though that sort of, it's no longer a tick box. We think there are some important things that can be done. And examples of that are, we do a lot of things with our customers to help them brand packing slips, emails, branded returns portal. We're really trying to extend that brand where possible. Sometimes on marketplaces that's more difficult, but if you're running your own web store or whatever, then we feel that you can extend your brand all the way through the delivery and the returns experience. So those are some of the things that we're looking to do to help. I've gone very fast. Hopefully that gave some perspective on 2021 and some of the things that we're expected and maybe excited for 2022. And that finishes the stuff I wanted to talk through. Please do, reach out to us, contact us. Again, even if you think we can't help you specifically, we may be able to make some introductions or some other contacts for you. So please contact us at shipstation.co.uk, and I will now stop sharing, and Chris, we can jump into some Q&A.
Fantastic. And Andrew, my very first question has got to be the obvious one. This COVID thing, excuse me, we've been living with for the last 2 years. Is it over, or is it genuinely still impacting carriers? And I'm thinking, Royal Mail, I keep hearing from them that they've got lots of staff shortages because of COVID. Other couriers we've seen slipping a little bit from performance-wise, where the odd parcel is not delivered next day, it's delivered in 2 days, or a collection gets missed. Are carriers still suffering, or have they just splurged tons and tons of money getting Christmas delivered, and now they're tightening the reins and just running a tighter ship, but they are pretty well staffed still?
It's a fantastic question. As you can imagine, it really varies from organisation to organisation, but it's a double whammy, right? They've had unprecedented demand along with unprecedented staff absence, if you know what I mean. So it's definitely a sort of perfect storm for them.
I have to say they did a pretty good job from what I see prior to Christmas. But anecdotally and personally, I've seen service standards maybe slipping just a little bit post-Christmas.
Yeah, interesting. We don't have, that's a really good point. We haven't seen, I don't have as much data in terms of the last, in January, but I think the other way of answering your question is we've definitely seen people, our merchants sort of, diversify is the wrong word. We've definitely seen our merchants, want to have options, let's say, right? Because, I think the other side of it is carriers, have the choice now, if you know what I mean. Many of our carrier partners were just not able to, were not able to take on the demand, if you know what I mean. So they were kind of, they stopped onboarding customers, some of them, after a certain period into 2021, because they just couldn't keep up with that. So I think the short answer to your question is COVID's definitely, I think, real for some of them. A lot of them that have access to capital have invested really, really well. They've built infrastructure, they've opened new sorting hubs and distribution centers, and obviously hired like crazies, as you can imagine. So I think like anything, Chris, sometimes it's access to capital, right? For some of them have been able to scale up really quickly and scale it well, and some of them that have less access to the capital have maybe have struggled, to sort of keep up with demand.
And it's interesting you talk about hiring like mad, because amazingly, I don't know, partly due to Brexit, partly due to COVID, but unemployment is lower than ever.
That's right.
Brexit, a lot of our European friends left and went back home. COVID, a lot more of them left and went back home. Most of them haven't returned. There are plenty of high-paying jobs. And I've even seen dustmen in Brighton on strike for higher wages, because frankly, HGV drivers can pretty much walk out of a job and get another one tomorrow. Yeah. This must be a real challenge for the delivery industry. Are they going to have to pay more on salaries, or will it even out?
Yeah, I think it's, the shoes on the other foot at the moment, if you know what I mean, from the employee's perspective. I mean, we're not as big in the LTL and freight side at the moment yet in Europe, but we are in North America, and we've definitely seen some very real challenges trying to find, HGV and just trying to maintain that. There's been a real, I guess the loyalty of the employees has changed quite a lot, if you know what I mean, because they know they can make more money. So I think even Hermes, and others that we partner with, they've invested very, very heavily, if you know what I mean. I think everyone has been affected by the wage increase, which ultimately gets passed on to the consumer. And in the middle of that, of course, is the merchant, right? Is the retailer in the middle of that whole jigsaw.
And it's kind of interesting because while wages for drivers are edging up more competitive than ever, consumers have actually got a ton less money than previously. I have to say, a lot of people that were furloughed on 80% of wages were actually kind of almost raking it in because they didn't have all the expenses of going to work. But that's all gone. People are back at work, or if they're working from home, they're not furloughed anymore. Inflation's up.
Yeah.
Ever since the fuel crisis, people have been worried about the economy. Obviously, the petrol crisis was very short-lived. There wasn't a shortage, lasted a week or so. But petrol prices haven't come back down. Domestic fuel, so many suppliers have gone bust that people are on much higher tariffs. National insurance is going up. Is this kind of going to really impact consumer spending, do you think? And will it impact it online more or less than on the high street?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our sense is that
big question, I know.
Yeah, no, I know it's kind of some pretty big economic questions there. I mean, listen, we can all feel it, right? It's, I think, just in our daily supermarket, kind of, or weekly supermarket, you can feel it, right? So, I guess to some of my slides earlier on was the numbers, 2021 was down year on year. It feels to me like, second half of last year, that really bit in, Chris, if you know what I mean. I think people's disposable income really took a hit, and we all know, right, we've all been in this industry for a while, let's say. So confidence is everything, right? As a consumer, if your confidence is down and you're worried about, your disposable income, then it does manifest. So it's hard, isn't it? I mean, the UK, I think, is bouncing back pretty well. The data that you've seen on the news the last couple of days, it seems like the economy is recovering. There is, unemployment is at an all-time low, or the reverse of that, the amount of open vacancies at an all-time high. So, But I guess confidence is everything. A lot of it, right?
Mm. I think confidence is the big concern that I have. If consumers are worried about money, and let's face it, if household electric gas bills go up the £700 a year they're talking about, you're talking 70, £80 a month extra that you haven't got to spend.
That's right.
And if you're short, then discretionary spending is the first to go. And I do think this opens up an opportunity, though.
Mm-hmm.
Typically in a recession, smaller and newer brands
can
be a lot more agile. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people to maybe switch purchases, and rather than getting, say, the latest iPad, maybe getting a non-branded tablet, rather than buying the latest Samsung Galaxy phone when it comes out, which I think they're coming out with an announcement about February 9th or something. Maybe a different brand mobile that is more cost effective.
Or refurb. You know, that industry continues to grow, right? Refurb electronics.
Yeah, and refurb's really interesting market as well, which we're seeing the marketplaces pick up on and make great strides on that. And that kind of brings me around to the online, offline again. Are people going to be searching online for better deals? And are they going to be staying online for convenience? I have to admit, I still haven't been to a shop for over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been to a high street. Don't really feel the need to go back. Are most people like me? I know there's a certain proportion of people that couldn't wait to get back to the high street and hate shopping online. But by and large, that shift has happened to online. Is the high street going to be able to tempt me back this year, do you think?
It certainly felt like that way, didn't it? In the sort of second half, people were definitely back to brick and mortar. I think it felt that way. Again, to some of your points earlier, I think there were certain categories where that definitely felt the same. I mean, even just on a personal level, we just we were renovating a house, and Home and Garden, those stores were packed, if you know what I mean. So I guess it varies. All of these things are interrelated. You will always, even though your disposable income is pinched, there will be some purchases that you have to make, if you know what I mean. And some of those purchases are typically bigger, and as in Home and Garden, or the larger, more risky purchases. And you and I both know you would, if you had the choice, you would possibly make some of those, decisions or purchases in store if you could do that, right? Versus a more commodity item online. So that's our sense.
And then you were talking about things like tech being a little bit muted. Do you think that's a temporary or a permanent change? I thought over the last year everyone was like kitting out their home offices, but maybe they did that in 2020 and haven't invested in 2021. But have we got to a stage where the kind of confinement of living and working at home for best part of 18 months means that we're not splurging on tech as much as we used to?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it feels to me, to your point, everyone did get kind of teched up for the lockdowns. That's certainly, what we all kind of witnessed, I guess, didn't we, in the news, and just trying to buy stuff, right? Trying to get supply of certain products was nigh on impossible. I think, there's always that kind of artificial demand, if that phrase makes sense, where you have a new product launch, a PS5 or Xbox, or even a new game or an iPhone. It's I wouldn't say it's artificial demand, but it kind of is, if you know what I mean, because it's a purchase that people, it's a desirable product, if you know what I mean. And we didn't see any of that last year. If you look in previous years, we've had big releases, and so I mean, PS5, I think there was some trailing demand, if you know what I mean. We didn't have any big tech launches that I can remember that kind of really sort of buoyed demand in the tech space. But
yeah, I have to admit, the one I missed was the Samsung Galaxy Note series, which they seem to be discontinuing. But you're right that when there is a big tech launch, it not only drives new purchases for those that can't wait to have it on launch day, but also drives the second-hand market for people that disposing of their older tech.
Yeah, we've seen a very big move in refurb. I know you touched on it earlier, but Back Market and some of the other specialist marketplaces, Cdiscount, some of the ones we work with in Europe, they're doing really, really well on refurb, and And also, part of the environmental side of it, I think people are thinking, about it too, right? So refurb in tech, I think, is something that just continues to grow and grow. Some of our merchants, do very well in that sector.
And refurb and the whole green issue in itself is interesting. I mean, the one thing that you can't get away from is, apart from offsetting, you can't really get rid of the environmental impact of a delivery. But the one thing no one ever talks about is the environmental impact again to the high street. By the time you get your car and drive there and park, yes, the carrier bags, people are still buying them. I don't know why. It's been years now where there's been a charge on them, but people just can't stop themselves from buying them. Which really is sort of more harmful for the environment? Is it a truck that drives into my road from Amazon, delivers to 5 houses before he drives off again, or is it me getting in my car and driving to town? Which is actually worse?
Well, the bit that we obviously forget sometimes is the supply up front. I mean, shipping, as we know, is shipping the products, the containers in the first place, right, is pretty harmful to the environment, right? So I think we all know it goes all the way through the supply chain, if you know what I mean. I think the supply at source and the energy to create those products in the first place. So I don't know. I think on a personal level, it's quite interesting to see if we will we manufacture products closer to home, if you know what I mean. There doesn't seem to be much of a shift from China in terms of for certain categories and certain industries. There's still a big reliance on that, which is why I guess we all saw the supply chain challenges, let's say, because there was such a reliance on China for that still. I don't know, Chris, I don't know, which is more environmentally kind of damaging per se, but I think there are some interesting things with both first mile and last mile, lockers. I mean, lockers are not the only option, right? But, I think there are some people may consider, how they can send and receive parcels, if you know what I mean, or products, let's say, without having to just, jump in a car or get a truck to come and pick up their item.
And something that's really interesting for me is the ship from store model. And I have to admit, DPD really recently acquired CitySprint.
That's right.
I love CitySprint.
Yeah.
DIY purchases from Wix, pick a day that'll arrive on, reasonable carriage rates, it's brilliant. But I think DIY is one of the few sectors that really have got the ship from store sorted out. Is 2022 going to be the year that retailers and brands with a high street estate are going to really start using that high street estate as mini distribution centres, or are they going to still ship from central locations?
It's interesting. I think that for me, I might be oversimplifying it, but that's for me is the way of that. I guess the point I think we call it inventory transparency. Being have a more kind of unified, holistic view of inventory. I think, turning the question just slightly, we just saw during COVID, the sort of the bite of COVID. Let's make more of a distinction. 2020, when it was very intense, we saw a number of our retailers or people just actually came to us that we hadn't worked with, that were creating ship from store. Matalan was a big one. There's a case study on our website you can see. So we definitely found people had inventory locked up. That was probably more COVID, but maybe that kind of was the light bulb moment that, actually it's really easy, whether it's us or other companies, there's some really great tech out there, that you can have off the back of your EPOS to create a warehouse location. It isn't really that difficult, if you know what I mean. As long as you have a good inventory and stock system, you just create your stores as another warehouse location and you just route that order to the store, So for us, we've seen a number of retailers just literally say, we want to use ShipStation, just ship from store, right? All it needs is an internet connection and a printer, and away you go. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it kind of is pretty easy. So I think, coming back to your question, if the technology's there and it helps you sort of, turn the stock better and make best use of your inventory, then it would seem a logical thing to do that. I think obviously the challenge, as always, is people's technology estate is, sometimes the tech is more flexible than others, right? Sometimes spinning up a ship from store model can be very, very difficult. That said, IKEA did it. I think we talked about this, Chris, on a previous session we did together, but IKEA spun up a, click and collect in 6 weeks, right? So if a retailer the size of IKEA can do it in 6 weeks, you've got to think that it can be done.
Yeah, and how much of a problem is the tech? I mean, We've spoken, you and I have spoken for years about this, about retailer not having joined up tech and having separate internet stock and store stock, and you buy for click and collect, and you arrive at the store and the product's not arrived yet, but you can see it on the shelf, but you can't take that because that's not internet stock. You've got to come back, wait for your delivery to arrive.
Totally.
What is the state of the large retailer estates and their tech? Are they getting somewhere close to be ready for ship from store?
I'm going to get shot probably from any of the large retailers on this session, so I pick my words carefully. I think it varies.
Naming no names, but just
I think it does vary. I think there's definitely some very I think to break that question down, there's great technology, right? And I don't mean just us, I mean in general, there's some fantastic products out there, right? So it feels to me like the days of having sort of the monolithic, everything running on one particular type of technology or platform, it feels to me like those days are gone, if you know what I mean. So it feels to me like people are now starting to put together, I guess, what we would call point solutions, specialist solutions that are really, really good at what they do, and finding ways of connecting it together. So in some ways you kind of get great technology, then create a different set of challenges, because then you have to integrate, 4 or 5 or 10 different platforms, right? So that's when kind of the connectivity or iPaaS integration platforms, I think, that we work with solve a lot of those problems, because then you can stitch together a really good ERP system to an e-commerce platform, to a warehouse management system, to all of the other stuff, right? So tech is there. It's always difficult for retailers to kind of select the right technology, right? Because there's no kind of manual, let's say, right? This market is moving so quickly. But good news is there's great tech. The challenge or complexity then is stitching it all together, right? So that's the things that we see typically.
Now, something else I'm interested in, actually, we've had a question. Did you observe any particular issues with shipping to Spain? Someone's had a nightmare with several carriers there. So I'd like you to kind of address Spain, but also the wider issue that I kind of get the feeling a lot of retailers did really, really well over the course of COVID. Lockdown, everyone working from home. If your products were in demand, you couldn't ship them fast enough. There are retailers I know that really struggled in certain sectors where their products weren't in demand. But I kind of get the feeling that people have kind of ridden the COVID wave for a year, almost over a year now, especially when the high street retail was locked down. And they've kind of used the wave of COVID purchases with people disposable income working from home, and not really address some fundamental issues that are still remaining from Brexit.
Yeah, that's right.
They haven't really started shipping to Europe again, and haven't for almost 18 months. They've been so busy with sales that they've not done long-term business development strategy. Am I kind of a little bit right there? Is it a problem? Do people need to start refocusing on cross-border selling and opening up new opportunities?
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this before, right? I think in my brain there's always the effort and reward, right? If you've got really strong domestic demand, then I get it, right? The effort is lower and the reward is high, if you know what I mean. Whereas European and global is almost the inverse, right? There's sometimes the effort is high and the reward can be high, as we know, right? But there are some real complexities. So I think the honest truth, Chris, is there were some people that really kind of dealt with it head on, if you know what I mean, and really embraced the challenge, as it were, and have done really well on the back of it. I think the irony, of course, for those of many of you in the audience, to the gentleman's question, to Jonathan, for those of you that were shipping to other countries, Brexit actually didn't present really any difference from what you would already do. And you still have to do the ERE number and the commodity HS codes and all the other stuff. But obviously, if you've only been selling to Europe before, then it was a whole new load of friction that you need to deal with. So I guess my point is, some people just said, it is what it is. We're gonna embrace it. We're gonna staff up. We're gonna coach the team. We're gonna refine our business process. And some people have really done really, really well out of it. And some people, including high-profile retailers, have just said, until further notice, we're gonna pull back from international and focus on our domestic market. So I think it comes down to the appetite for risk, as it were, and the appetite to really invest in it, will be my observations, Chris.
And I think I kind of think with maybe a muting of the UK economy and consumer confidence, I think my opinion, and you may disagree, is that 2022 is the time to really focus and double down on Europe and indeed further afield sales. If UK demand drops, you need to replace those sales from somewhere else.
Yeah, and if the supply challenges become ease a little bit, then that would make perfect sense. I think that might be part of it too, right? With limited supply, maybe people were trying to focus on the domestic market.
And then in particular, a question from Jonathan: have you seen particular issues with shipping to Spain?
I'd have to check with some of the guys, if I'm honest. I haven't specifically heard about Spain. We've had just complexities in general, without being too kind of cliched in that answer. I think some retailers got poleaxed by the complexity. We've definitely had some challenges with certain carriers doing a better job, if you know what I mean, with their tech. I think when you have massive change like Brexit, I think the maturity of their process and their tech really kind of starts to shine. So some carriers really struggled with it, and some did really, really well. So I'd have to check for you, Jonathan, specifically. I would say that in my kind of day-to-day, I haven't heard specific issues about Spain, but we've had some real challenges in general shipping into Europe.
So, Jonathan, what I would recommend, and in fact, anyone that's got any questions or in-depth questions, is after this session, we've got a 15-minute break. Drop along to the ShipStation booth on the Tame Bay Live website, and you may be able to get to speak to Andrew or someone straight away. But if not, just drop a note that you've called past, and they'll get in touch with you. Just leave your contact details. Or if anyone is watching this on demand after the event, ShipStation.com, just Google ShipStation and get in touch with them.
One thing that's really interesting on that, actually, I'm not sure if it's still live today, but Metapack have a really good sort of delivery index. So you can put in what type of product you're trying to send to and which country, and it kind of gives you a rating of which carriers are good for that type of item or that type of service. So there is kind of like a grading system or a scoring system. Again, that you might be able to find out at metapack.com. If not, then ask one of the ShipStation team, and we can try and get you that information.
And Metapack is obviously one of the ShipStation family.
Sorry, sister company. That's correct. Sorry.
Get Metapack or ShipStation, and they'll put you in touch with each other. Now we've got another question: how do I know when I'm ready for ShipStation? And I think I'd like to broaden this one to. Mm-hmm. What should prompt me to speak to ShipStation? Should it be just like I'm still a small seller picking and packing orders and writing labels by hand? Is it I'm a large seller and I want shipped from store? Is it that I've got problems with international shippings? What sort of pain points make people want to come to you? What makes it an ideal time for them to have a chat with you and find out if you're suitable to work together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's a big question. I think if we almost take it over our sort of lifetime as retailers, that might be the easiest way of breaking that down. So there will come a point where, printing out shipping labels manually just doesn't scale, right? So it varies per person. It might be when you're doing 10, 15, 20, 50 orders a day, right? I think, so there's a kind of order volume piece of it. I think if you find that you're spending too much time just doing pick and pack with manual process and you're not able to focus on how you're merchandising or selling on the channels, if you know what I mean, then for me, that would be kind of like the classic, you're stuck in the weeds and how can you move your horizon up a little bit, right? So I think that's what we often see. People are a lot of our customers come from manual to automated, if that makes sense. They're doing it themselves manually. They're running around with their hair on fire. They're kind of down in the weeds, working in the business, but not on it. I know it's a bit cliched, but so that's one thing that we definitely see. When people are selling on more channels in more countries, the complexity exponentially increases, right? Because you've got orders firing in from all kinds of places. So that's definitely a trigger point for people to look at technology like ours. I think when your inventory becomes more distributed and therefore you have more than, you're not just shipping out of your your shed or your office or whatever, and you've got a warehouse, so you've got multiple warehouses. That's definitely complexity where we can help, where we can route that order or help you distribute that inventory to different places. If you're selling in different countries and you want to route that order again to different warehouse locations, we can help you with that. If you want carrier choice or fulfillment choice and you don't want to deal with a headache of integrating to it, then that's probably the biggest area that we can help you, right? Because we have all of those integrations to all of the selling channels. We have those integrations to the carriers, to a lot of the 3PLs. and we can just save you that time and headache of doing that tech integration. So I think those are some of the reasons that we typically see, Chris.
Now, getting back to 2022 forecasting, Black Friday, is it going to be busy this year or not? I think this is an interesting year because we've got a lot of big weekends coming up, if I can put it that way. Obviously, Christmas and New Year next year are going to fall over a weekend yet again. So we're going to have a 4-day weekend. Easter's going to be a 4-day weekend. Queen's Jubilee is going to be a 4-day weekend. Then there'll be Prime Day. Then there'll be the Black Friday week. By the time we get to Black Friday, we're going to be all spent out. And is it really washed up now? I can remember 5 or 6 years ago, there was fights on the high street retailers where someone had 10 tellies on for a couple of quid or whatever. It got a lot more muted since then, and it's gradually sort of spread out from a Black Friday to a Black Friday weekend to a Black Friday week. And now it seems like Black Friday month, everyone's starting their sales end of October. Is it just going to spread into September this year, or will it sort of contract again to one big sale day?
Let's not forget the reason that it's called Black Friday, right? Because it was the one time in the US when the retailers went into the black rather than being in the red, right? So I think that's the point really in my mind is, you know, could we smooth out that demand curve a little bit? I mean, you're right though, Chris, there's a bunch, you know, there's the Football World Cup, right? There's all kinds of stuff coming. So I think, you know, with my sort of retailer hat, I would like to smooth out that demand, and rather than having everything happen in the last 6 weeks of the year, you know, could you smooth that out? So it feels to me like Black Friday is always going to be a thing, particularly in the UK. You know, it's definitely not as much of a thing in Europe. That's certainly what we've launched in France and Germany recently, and Black Friday was almost a kind of non-event. I know that's a generalization, but that was kind of a non-event.
Let's be honest, it's only an event in the States because they've got Thanksgiving Thursday and everyone's off, hungover, bored, not got any work to do. They go shopping. We don't have that in the UK, so it's an artificial UK event, and even less applicable once you get to Europe. But on the other hand, for many, many retailers, it is a crucial date in the calendar, a week in the calendar, a month in the calendar, because it is the real start of the Christmas selling season.
That's right. So I guess my point is, you know, I think it's definitely here to stay. And I think, you know, the consumer has become sort of programmed and used to it. I guess my point is, you know, what are the other things that we could do, you know, during the retail calendar to stimulate demand and, you know, take advantage of other things. You know, you and I both know, you know, weather has a big impact on that. You know, there's all kinds of macro factors, right, that change demand. So, yeah.
And I guess it's just like a couple of weeks until we get the Winter Olympics as well. Not to mention, as you said earlier, the football. So there's a lot going on this year.
Exactly.
And we literally got about 2 minutes left. If you could tell someone, a large retailer or a brand or a smaller SME, the one thing they should be focused on this year, what would it be to grow their business and keep the sales coming in, regardless of the macroeconomic environment, etc., and the COVIDs and Brexits? What's the one thing people should be focused on this year?
Blimey, you put me on the spot there. You know, it always comes back to me of people, process, technology. I know that's again a kind of cliched answer, but you know, I would say invest in good tech, not just us, but I mean, you know, other tech in general. Invest in good technology. There's great technology out there. It enables you to be agile and responsive to what you see. We know that people's a challenge, right? We can't hire people, or hire people quick enough, but also upskilling, you know, the team that you have and invest in the team that you have. These are 3 things, by the way. This is not one thing. I apologize. And then obviously business process, right? We still see day to day some really, really great businesses, but have really inefficient process, right? So those are the kind of 3 things that we typically work on with our customers: as people, process, and technology, and try and help them, you know, get ready for scale, which is what our whole gig is.
I must apologise, Andrew. We are out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up now. But very interesting conversation, and I know that a lot of people will be interested in digging in further. So I would encourage them. We've got a 15-minute break coming up. Just go to the ShipStation stand and drop a note with your name and contact details. Or indeed, Andrew, I'm sure you've logged into the Tamebay Live platform. If you just search Andrew Norman, you can request his contact details.
No problem.
And importantly, at the end of the day, when you've done those requests, don't forget to download your delegate bag before the platform closes after the show, because when you do, you'll get any PDFs you've added to your delegate bag, and you'll get all of your contacts. So if you're making contact with Andrew, make sure you download your delegate bag and actually save that contact so you can get in touch. So thank you so much, Andrew. A pleasure as always. And thank you for being part of Tame Bay Live this year.
My pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate your time.